Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, your GM, your host, your guide on the show Behind the Screen, where we talk about games. We talk about game design, game theory, things about our games, things that bring us joy, trying to become better game masters and game designers. And that's actually what we're talking about today. Today we're going to be talking about a game that has just been re-released by Chaosium. So Chaosium is publishers of games that we love here on Iconic. Call of Cthulhu, which we ran a lot of when Becca was running, and RuneQuest, which sort of the foundation for exploring Glorantha, and a game that I love. I run every week. But they released a new version of their basic fantasy, or sorry, no, basic role playing game. BRP used to be called the Gold Book. It's now this. Well, here's the cover of it. It is the core of their Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest games. It is a D100 based gaming system, which, as you may know if you've been following me, is one of my favorite ways to resolve skills and contests and conflicts in role-playing games. So they just released the PDF of this. It will be out later in the year. If you buy this from Chaosium, you get the cost of the PDF off the final cost of the print book. So I'll put a link in the show notes when the video goes live on YouTube. But I wanted to talk about this game because I'm going to argue that it's not a game. Well, it's not just a role-playing game. It is. There is everything that you would expect to see in a role-playing game, especially a modern core rulebook. You've got great art, you've got great layout, you've got what is a role-playing game. What are skills and characteristics and powers? How does the system work? How do we fight and engage in combat? What do we have to fight? Rules for equipment, how to be a game master, how to set up your setting, and a ton of creatures as well. The book's about 250 pages, so it's pretty succinct as it goes running through this. Yes, John Doom, it is in fact an elaborate ruse. And here's why. BRP, Basic Role Playing, is put out under the Orc license. Now, the Orc license is something that came out of the OGL. I'm going to call it a debacle. I think that is a fair and generous way of describing what went down earlier in the year with the Open Gaming License. And a number of companies came together and were like, we need to make sure something like this doesn't happen again, and actually rally around the fans and the communities who are wanting to produce more games. I know Pinnacle it supports the Orc license. I know Chaosium signed on to be under the Orc license. Paizo has done this as well. Ulysses has done this as well. Free League has done this as well. And essentially, those games that are being published under the Orc license are part of this open role-playing content license that will exist in perpetuity, handled by a neutral party, a nonprofit who will ensure that the license and the games that are published under it, the SRDs that are published under it, remain open and use for game designers. Yes, Rook, I appreciate the emoji. For those of us who only speak in emoji, Rook is here to translate. He is like my personal emoji translator, much like Obama had a personal anger translator, if you remember that Key and Peele sketch. So actually, what basic role playing is it's a book for designers. Sure, you could pick this up, create your own setting, and run with it. But in the same way that Savage Worlds really wants you to take the Savage Worlds core book and put it into use, and eventually make your own fan, swag, and ace licensing. This is what the BRP book is. It is a class in how to design a game for using the BRP engine. Jason Durall and Steve Perrin that have put in more optional rules than you would ever want to use, more ways to tweak and break the system, more ways to customize the power set. The core book comes with spells, so magic like Call of Cthulhu, sorcery, superpowers, and mutations, and psionics. 5 different ways to handle powers in a BRP game. Now, if you're a fan of other BRP based games, it explains how to replicate certain aspects from RuneQuest. It talks about how to replicate certain aspects from Call of Cthulhu. But this game, I would argue it a lot like the Suede rulebook, which I, always have within arm's reach. It is really enough of a rule set so that you can start playing with it, and then a lot of guidance on how to get your own custom campaign set up for it. This takes one step further, and I would argue that the basic role-playing book is a designer's book. The goal is for designers who want to design in the D100 space to be able to take this book, slap the BRP logo on their product, and go running. And so for that, I applaud them. They didn't just put their games out under the Orc license. They built a book specifically to teach you how to build their game and then publish it under the Orc license. Yes, Padre, all of my favorite companies have started to use this license. We're even talking about in Strange Owl what a Clash SRD would look like. Who knows? We'll see where that goes. Speaking of, I got to do a little bit of self-promotion. If you haven't already signed up, please go over and check out the new Kickstarter that Strange Owl Games will be putting out. It is Amboria, Adventuring in the World Under Starlight, Role-Playing in the World Under Starlight, I think it is. We just got the Kickstarter video from Bob, and we will show it off here later this week on stream, and it is going to be pretty amazing. Like, it's gorgeous. So we're trying to get as many eyes as we can on this. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that link around, right? The more eyes on it before we go live, the better the project is. And we have 20 stretch goals already planned and even more in the pipe. This is going to be a beautiful book. It's going to be offset printed, and Bob Crumb's doing all of the art. And you know how much we love Bob Crumb's art on this channel. So if you're a game master, you've probably thought about creating your own game. I know that on the Iconic Production Discord, we were talking about how to get things published for Suede. I know John is thinking about publishing something for Suede. I know Rook is thinking about publishing something. And I think we've never been at a better opportunity for doing stuff like this. With the Orc license and with Savage Universe, companies are realizing that the rising tide raises all ships. And that if they can get their fan base into and creating content for their game, well, then it's going to be a lot like the OGL worked for Dungeons and Dragons. Chaosium already had a great swag-like program on DriveThruRPG. The Johnstown Compendium for RuneQuest and the Miskatonic University for Call of Cthulhu. Don't know why I paused there. And the Explorer Society for 7th Sea 2nd Edition. But they've taken it one step farther. They've given you the keys to the kingdom. They've given you the tools that if you like D100 games, I mean, between this and OpenQuest, honestly, you have a great foundation for any new D100 game that you want to start with. I mean, OpenQuest 2 is the basis for Jackals and upcoming Urban Decay. Don't hide that. They did an amazing job. Newt did a great job, and I hope to at some point in the future, we're talking about maybe me coming on the OpenQuest podcast and talking about Jackals and why I love OpenQuest. Now I've got BRP, and I know that we're looking at doing more Clash-like games, but I learned so much from reading this book. It's not an expensive book. You can get the PDF, I want to say, for some amount of dollars. Let me look this up right now. Things I should have looked up before the start of the show. There we go. $24 for the PDF. And again, it's 250 pages of great design advice. Yes, Rook, agnostic gaming is fun for a designer. And this book shows you how and what you can do with the system. I completely agree. So here's the thing. You can be a great GM and never step out of your chosen game. I believe that is 100% possible. I was a great Rifts GM. But I think if you want to be a designer and you want to be a writer in the industry and make little money to lots of little money, you benefit from reading more games than just the one you're playing. We talked about this before. It exposes you to different frameworks and different patterns of thinking. Sort of the reason that C.S. Lewis talks about reading old books, because it exposes you to patterns of thinking that you are unfamiliar with. I still read D&D books, though I don't write for D&D, because there's always some nugget that I take away. One of my favorite authors, Stephen Donaldson, wrote the first trilogy of Thomas Covenant, and the publisher wanted him to do a follow-up trilogy, and he had no story. He had no ideas. And I think it was Del Rey constantly took him out to dinner and constantly pitched him new ideas for the second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. And finally he was like, no, all of your ideas are bad. If I were going to do it, I would do it. And the second and third Chronicles of Thomas Covenant kind of sprung full form in his mind. So why do I bring that up? Because sometimes in reading other people's work, you will be inspired to take a mechanic or way of doing things and convert it to your game. To rip it apart, put back the pieces together. Other times you will look at someone else's work and go, oh, if I were to do that, I would do this way. It can be inspiring in a variety of different ways. So Rook says, Jackals, Cypher, and now Suede have been instrumental in your design ideas. Yeah, I love that. Mark is probably okay. He played a little Rifts with me. He was a co-GM, I think, of our... No, you weren't. You played in our Rifts game. It was an okay Rifts GM. But before that, I was great, Mark. So that's my look at BRP. It's not really a review. I read through it. It's a game system, right? There's, most of the time what sells me on a game is about 60% system and 40% setting. And how well those two play together. So this is a lot like Suede. This is a setting neutral, setting agnostic rule set. It's slim. It's quick. It has a lot of design advice, usually in the form of optional rules or different ways of looking at how things work. The art is good. It's not great. It's not RuneQuest art. It's not Call of Cthulhu art. It's sort of generic, evocative art. Kind of get your mind set in the fact that you're in a role-playing book. And that's not, I'm not trying to speak negatively of any of the art pieces or the artists that are in there. They're all fine. But for me, the core of the book is this fact that it's a design manual. Personally, I would have been fine if they just had the cover art and the back cover art and the rest was essentially dedicated to more design space. But I think like Suede, you could pick up the core BRP book, come up with your campaign setting, and go. You wouldn't need anything more than the BRP book. But there's enough examples of everything, mutations and powers and magic, that as a designer, you have enough to look at to go, all right, well, here's the list they gave me. Here's how all of this works. I want this new thing. I can extrapolate from what I have to something new. John, have a Benny, my friend. It is burp. Tink says, I love all these game companies doing things specifically to encourage creating. Yes, and that's why I think I want to highlight when they do things like this. Because I'm a creator. I love the fact that more companies are doing more things to encourage creativity in a more open and free way. Right? Because here's the thing, Johnstown Compendium, Miskatonic Repository, and Explorer Society, they were all great for sort of fan publications because you still had to pay the drive-through licensing fee. So it was sort of equivalent to the swag program for Suede, which of course I love. But this, with the Orc license, is far more akin to the Ace model, where you can follow the licensing template and what you need to know. Not a lawyer, read it yourself. You can publish your own BRP-based games. And here's the thing. When it comes to big games, right, D20 is huge. It is the biggest die. Therefore, it should, it is the largest section of the gaming space. But there are a ton of games that owe their lineage and their legacy to the system created for Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest, which is BRP. We had things like outside of Chaosium, right? I would argue that, Palladium, probably Rolemaster was inspired by that. Eclipse Phase, Harn, and more. Superworld, which was also published by Chaosium. Superworld is what led to the Wildcard series, which put George R.R. Martin and several other authors on the map. There's a legacy here that, in the same way that if you slap a D20 OGL logo, used to be able to, it was sort of instant cred. Now, granted, it's a medium-sized fish in the pond, but Chaosium and BRP have name recognition. Suede, Savage Worlds has name recognition. Helps you get a little bit of a leg up when you start publishing. Brooke, I would love to have that discussion with you. Sean says, I may have pronounced Rulemaster. I will be honest. I ran a ton of not Rolemaster, but Middle-earth role-playing system, MERP. And I bought versus, Against the Dark Master. And I love Against the Dark Master. I do not know if it will see the table. I tried to give Harp a try. High Adventure Roleplay. I think BRP does a better job with making a fun and usable D100 system. But don't get me wrong, there is something fun about those critical tables in Rulemaster or Rolemaster, however you pronounce that. Yes, Tink, and kind of going back, the thing that Suede helps even more than the BRP book is the fact that Suede has Savage Universe, managed and maintained by yours truly, and we will hype your stuff. Savage World is Pinnacle is dedicating money to making sure that there is a place and for licensees to advertise and hype their material. So that's BRP. I'll put a link in the show notes when we get over there. I'll put another link to the Kickstarter for landing page for Amboria, another D100 base game using the Clash system. And we'll be back on Thursday. We're going to go back to our Savage Worlds. This was a little step away. We're going to be talking about playing Savage Worlds with your kids. I'm going to be drawing a lot on a book that I don't think you can get anymore. has advice from Jody on how to run your games for different ages. It was originally in the Big Savage Worlds Adventure Edition box. This book right here, the Savage Worlds World Builder and Game Master Guide. But that'll be Thursday. John, anytime you get to defenestrate a character is a wonderful time for a GM. It always makes me think of David Eddings, where someone gets defenestrated and everyone does not know what that means, but assumes it's far worse than what it actually is. So, until then, stay safe, stay healthy to gaming. No Crucible tonight. I have family in town. Several other members of the game had things come up, so we're going to take a night off and relax. Rook, I would love, please post that spell in the Patreon. Speaking of our Patreon, if you are not a member of the Iconic Tribe, come over and join us at patreon.com/iconicproduction. Allows you to have such great topics and chats with us on the channel, as well as, Rook will possibly show you his defenestration spell that he made for D&D. Really hoping for that. So until next time, have a good one, everyone, and get some gaming in this week. I'm going to steal that from Landauer. It's a good way to sign off. Have a good one.